Why don't we start with yesterday's important news out of Florida and Arizona, where they, of course, held their primary races. Now, in Florida, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum narrowly won the state's Democratic nomination for governor in one of the most significant upsets of the primary season. And I can tell you what an upset that was. I saw commercial after commercial after commercial for all the other candidates. But he actually becomes the first black major party candidate for governor in the state's history, in Florida history. Now, Gillum's going to be facing off against the Republican Party's nominee, Trump back, Trump obsessed, going to put my baby in a Trump T-shirt, Congressman Ron DeSantis. Think about how that's going to set up. I would stop right there for a second. Steve Kornacki, what an upset this was. Again, if you're down in Florida, I was down in Florida and saw ads for a couple of weeks. And boy, you didn't see his ads. You saw ads from everybody else. How did this happen? Where did he come from? And let's just talk about the battle lines that have been drawn in two deep state South states where I've lived, Georgia and Florida. In both states, you have black Democrats, Medicare for all, progressive candidates going against hardcore right-wing Trumpistas all the way in for Donald Trump. I mean, how's that set up for the fall?
This the Florida race is each base you can look at, Democratic side, Republican base, each Trump-era base really got what it wanted last night. One thing that's staggering to me was all the votes I don't think are fully counted yet. At least they weren't when I went to sleep. But even at that point last night, there was something close to 1.5 million votes that had been cast on the Democratic side in that primary. That was up from somewhere around 850,000 last time. There were more than 1.6 million on the Republican side. I was going back. I could not find an example in modern Florida politics where you had the turnout in both parties that high, over 3 million combined votes at least going to be cast between those two parties. So a lot of energy on both sides there. How did the Gillum thing happen? You're right. The money wasn't there for him. Our friends, the polls, they weren't there for him again. He was never in first place. He was never even in second place in any of the polls taken before this thing. But the energy was there. The grassroots energy was there. This is somebody who ran to the left. He positioned himself to the left, certainly to the left of Gwen Graham. She had been the front runner, the favorite in this thing. She had been leading in the polls. She followed, I think you'd have to say, the traditional model of Florida politics. She tried to position herself a little bit more in the center with an eye toward appealing to what traditionally have been the swing voters in a swing state like Florida in the general election. Gillum ran to her left. He talked about impeaching Trump. He talked about abolishing ICE. You know, a lot of people have made in the last couple of days. Bernie Sanders came in there and campaigned for him. There was energy there. And when you looked at it last night, you know, around the state, the sort of political geography of that victory for Gillum. You mentioned Tallahassee Mayor. He was winning in South Florida. He was winning in Miami-Dade. He was winning in some of those rural panhandle areas where Gwen Graham was supposed to be winning. He was rolling up numbers in Jacksonville, in Orlando, even in, Hillsborough, Tampa, all around the state. He was showing some strength last night.
Boy, and I'll tell you what, if you looked at the amount of money that Green put into that race, a latecomer spent millions and millions. So many Republican or Democratic Party insiders were sure he was going to buy that election. The polls sure looked like he had a good chance. And man, they get to the voting booth, and Michael Steele, it seems like Democrats knew exactly what they wanted and what they didn't want. Now, talk about how November is going to set up here. Like this is cliff diving for both Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. We could have the first two black governors elected in deep South states. Douglas Wilder won in Virginia.
Right.
But in the deep South, we could either have two progressive black governors in deep South states where George Wallace did great in 68, in 72. Or you could have a massive victory for Donald Trump in both of those states where, again, two people that have totally bought in to the Trump personality cult, even dressing their babies in "Make America Great Again" T-shirts and bragging about it, and whispering "Build that wall" to their young infants. I mean, that's about as stark a contrast as you get, isn't it, Michael?
Oh, you are so right. I mean, you can't set this baby up any better than that. It is going to be a barn burner of an election across the Deep South in Georgia and Florida. And then you have to also look at Maryland, where you have another African-American male progressive in Ben Jealous running against incumbent Republican Larry Hogan. In a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat, Hogan is sitting there with a 70+% job approval. So you see this emerging dynamic where voters are going to have to make real stark choices. What I find interesting about this, though, is what Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders team, just put it writ large nationally, has been able to do. They've gone out and they've tried to identify candidates, definitely progressive, very clearly stated, no holding back, and running to the left of the Democratic Party. And is pushing the party and forcing its hand, as we saw with the race in Florida, to now come to grips with having to rally around a progressive agenda that, writ large, again, a lot of Democrats may not be sold on. That's an opening for Republicans. You're going to see that narrative emerge fairly quickly. Gillum is someone people do not know across Florida, outside of, maybe strong Democratic circles necessarily. So there's going to be a lot of examination about him, which will make this a very interesting race indeed.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.